let's talk about the big tech's censorship dilemma that they've got going on with the EU. So we start with this tweet that sort of sets this up from a EU commissioner, Thierry Breton, who apparently is one of the EU commissioners. But it's not just him. So he's saying here, look, we've got to get this working group together to discuss enforcement of the Digital Service Act, the DSA. He's saying this is now law in Europe. It must be respected, respect my authority kind of thing. And Ursula's on it as well, another EU commissioner. We're bringing European values into the digital world. That's more true than it appears at first glance, actually. I'll come back to why. With strict rules on transparency and accountability in our Digital Services Act aims to protect our children, societies and democracies. I would briefly point out that as an EU commissioner, she's not elected.
Well, can I also say that the idea of European values sounds farcical on the face of it, but it does give me hope, because obviously this is an attempt to conduct German-style control of the internet, but I hope they're very Italian in their enforcement.
If you're anything like me, witnessing the gradual decline of Western civilization can really drain your energy. But if you want to get through the day with your sanity intact and keep a sharp mind as we wade through the ashes together, a good night of restful sleep is vital. That's why you need Rest Again. Rest Again is a natural supplement that contains 11 scientifically backed ingredients designed to get you to sleep and help you to stay asleep by working with your body's natural processes and not against them. Rest Again wants to ensure you get a great night's sleep and make sure to do this by sticking to doses of ingredients that have been shown to work and have not chosen the cheap option for you. Rest Again starts by supplementing the vitamins that your body needs to produce GABA and melatonin, the sleep chemicals, naturally, including vitamin D, B6 and magnesium. Then, Rest Again adds in herbal extracts like ashwagandha and L-theanine, which have been shown in scientific studies to help people get a better quality of sleep. And to top that off, Rest Again gives you what you need to get to sleep at night, not just after your body has started producing what it needs. That means an extra dose of melatonin and GABA that tells your body it's time to sleep. Rest Again doesn't claim to be magic and can't promise you that it will work for you, but if you're not getting the results that you're satisfied with, then Rest Again guarantees to give your money back. So if you're interested in improving your sleep, then click the link below and get 25% off.
Well, yeah. I mean, European values. I mean, you just think sort of people marching with very high boots, don't you?
Some of them. I think some of them having a siesta at the end of the day. So that's
it's Anglo values are the good ones.
Yeah.
But everything that's come out of France and Germany has just been a disaster.
Pretty much.
So, as of today, very large online platforms must apply these new laws. So, that's basically the issue we've got. Actually, before we come on to why that's such a problem, I just want to plug something, which is our website.
We have one, yes.
Yes. So if you don't like watching on YouTube, because YouTube are censorious bastards, as we are currently talking about, if you go to our website, you can watch the podcast live, or you can watch it later, but you can watch the full version without all the censorship that we have to cut out because the bits that we can't put on YouTube if we don't want to get yeeted.
You also get an extra half hour of comments every day, which you can send in if you pay us, which please do, because it helps keep the business.
You don't need to pay. You can just watch it on there, and people should sign up and bookmark it at least bookmark it, even if you do watch on YouTube, because one day you'll wake up and we will just be gone because of this issue that we're talking about. Right. So so this is the thing. Digital Service Act. Now, where's the scrolly thing?
Here it is.
Scroll down a little bit. And we get to what this. So this is basically the big piece of.
This is a scrolly thing.
Oh, is it?
This says down on there and up.
You can hit down and you can hit up and look. It's amazing.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
Tech works, Grandad.
Yes. Okay. So now that I am not boomering the tech anymore. Right. Anyway. So basically, this is the big piece of
the tech. The boomerang will continue until morale improves.
This is the big piece of legislation that they passed at the end of last year. Now, then, what they got to now is thinking, okay, well, how can we enforce this? Because basically, this gave them, all these new digital powers that they're all looking for. So, let's see what their justifications are.
Well, they're starting a Ministry of Truth. Well, essentially, I'm aware of that. They're creating a new part of the European Parliament or the European Commission in Brussels to be able to monitor this. I covered a bit of this last week. They're already looking to try and censure parts of Twitter and Elon Musk because of the fact that there is lots of varying information going on right now from the Gaza and Israel conflict going on right now. So you've got people from both sides saying, this is happening, no, this is happening, no, this is happening, contradicting one another constantly. We're in the middle of the fog of war. So who really knows outside of speculation from experts? And you don't know if you can trust the experts. But thank God, Ursula von der Leyen, Thierry Breton, and the rest of the European Commission have decided that they are the one true arbiters of truth and can tell Elon where exactly the information.
Well, when you say
correct
who
and
knows,
incorrect.
their answer to that is the EU Commission.
Yes.
They're the ones who know.
So depending on their subjective evaluation of some very, very questionable facts that we get from both sides, because we're in the middle of a war, well, they're in the middle of a war, so propaganda will be rampant on both sides. Thank God that Ursula von der Leyen and the others have appointed themselves the arbiters of truth.
Yeah, they do actually make specific reference. I'm gonna jump around a bit now, but let's go to this one. So this is what that Ferry Britain. So he basically wrote this sort of long letter trying to explain, why they're doing this, and it mentions that bit that you're talking about there, Harry. So let me quote from it: "Events in the Middle East triggered by Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel have raised the stakes even higher. The widespread dissemination of illegal content and disinformation linked to these events carries the clear risk of stigmatizing certain communities and destabilizing our democratic structures. Not to mention exposing children to violent content." So let's just deconstruct that a bit.
Democratic structures basically just means the far leftist radical consensus that the
people who
elites
want to
have
vote
found
against the
themselves in.
mainstream is what he's concerned about there. So,
Well,
so democracy is defined as the cozy, comfortable system that they all operate in, and they're not actually even
Whatever
elected.
the elites benefit from is democracy. Whatever they don't benefit from is fascism.
Yes,
This is how it works.
yes, exactly right. But just to break that down. Are you guys thinking of the Norm Macdonald joke when I just reread this line? The events in the Middle East carries a clear risk of stigmatizing certain communities.
Yes, it's imagine what would happen if a bunch of radical Muslim terrorists snuck a dirty bomb into New York, detonated it, and killed millions of people, committed hundreds of atrocities. Wouldn't the blowback against law-abiding Muslims just be absolutely terrible?
Yes, and that's exactly what he's gone to here. The concern with the events in Israel is that it might stigmatize certain communities, destabilize our democratic structures.
Well, if you didn't mass import those certain communities into your democratic structure, the democratic structure wouldn't be unstable.
Yeah, well, and also we don't have a democratic structure. We have a sort of elitist structure.
Oh yeah, an
Yes,
oligarchy
all of that.
layered over the top.
Yes, but see, the issue they've got, what sort of brought this up in the news for me, is because at the moment they are trying to put together an enforcement structure. Going back to that first tweet, where basically they've now set out that disinformation. Let me go back now to the bit with the disinformation. Yeah, so
You're just going to flash up the website every so often, like subliminal messaging.
Yeah, better than what they flashed up in Fight Club.
No.
So yes. So look, the reason they say that they're doing it is to counter illegal content. So with respect to this Hamas thing. So for example, presumably the videos of Hamas killing people, that is what they're sort of proposing it as. I don't even know if you necessarily want to purge that from the internet, because I mean that's the reality of things like I remember seeing some horrific footage leaked out onto the internet after the Manchester Arena bombing. Do we really want to purge that completely? Because I mean, this is the reality of multiculturalism.
Well,
But we don't, because it's the reality of multiculturalism.
Yes.
But the elites which wish to ossify the narrative and don't they want to have total narrative control and also ensure that dissenters can't have any credibility to their claims. Of course they want to expunge that.
Yeah, what they're actually doing they're trying to do it more subtly than just outright banning it. What they're essentially trying to do is ban independent journalism, because those people who are going to go on the ground and risk themselves going out and putting themselves in dangerous situations so they can get on the ground footage of what's going on, that footage, due to the new standards set by acts like this, will be deemed as either being extreme or too violent for consumption by children. Anything like that will be laid over as an excuse for why they can't put it out there, when realistically the actual reason is just that we don't want people outside of the elite consensus being able to report on this and go and tell people what's actually going on. Because if you do that, then people might understand that they're being lied to.
But it's the whole mindset that these people have of the population of children. We need to protect them. So when they do actually talk explicitly in some of this about effective safeguards for children, or however they phrase it.
Yeah, there it is right there on the
Yeah.
screen. New obligations for the protection of minors on any platform in the EU.
Bear in mind, these are the same people that are signed up to the UN AIDS principles that says that minors should be able to access gender-affirming care and consent.
And these are the same people that would have stood by for years and years and years, allowed Twitter as it existed previously under its previous safety standards to exist without any of this kind of scrutiny. When, as we know, when Elon took it over, there was a massive controversy about the level of content on there that was depicting child sexual
Which he
exploitation.
massively reduced. Yeah.
Which Joel Roth didn't when he was in charge, and he wrote his PhD thesis on why children should be able to use Grindr.
All of a sudden, somebody comes and takes charge of the institution who says, actually, I want there to be a greater measure of free speech allowed on the platform. That's all of a sudden when they want to protect children. Prior to that, when there was actual child sex exploitation going on the platform, they either didn't say anything, or they certainly didn't enact anything this far-reaching.
My broader point is they actually treat all of us like children. They don't just treat the children like this. They treat all of us like this. We all need to be protected from information that they don't want us to have. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here about misinformation and disinformation. Connor, you actually remember what the difference is, don't you?
Yeah, the Biden administration in their bill for AI rights, because they want total algorithmic control of the internet and government institutions, set out a series of definitions of disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. And of course, everything's in American vassal states. We're operating by their definitions. So misinformation is false information unintentionally spread or intentionally spread by citizens on social media. Disinformation is false information spread by an enemy state as a means of propaganda to demoralize the citizenry during wartime. This is why they say it's a threat to our democracy. And malinformation is correct information shared outside the appropriate context. Who sets the appropriate context? Well, the stakeholders that form this policy, which is the regime-appointed experts that say, actually, we want to achieve racial equity here, so you can't bring up FBI crimes.
So I've been through these documents, and they don't make any reference, or at least very little, to misinformation or malinformation. It's all disinformation.
Right.
But presumably, once you've given yourself a whole load of legal powers as to what you can do with disinformation, which is, false information spread by enemy actors, which, in theory, I can kind of see that. It's very easy to then use that set of tools against misinformation, malinformation. And then it's a question of who defines what information is inaccurate, spread amongst the citizenry within your sort of political debate, and who decides which information is true but unhelpful and therefore needs to be limited.
There's a few problems with that as well. First of all, obviously, we know as with the Patriot Act, it was set up to originally police foreign actors and terrorists at work in America, and it just ended up creating the NSA to massively spy and surveil on innocent Americans. Then there's also the idea that, disinformation, obviously easily conflated, and they deliberately conflate the definitions, because types like CNN will say that you're spreading disinformation even if you're a domestic actor, so just to sabotage you. But they'll also say you're under the influence of disinformation. For example, Trump being a Russian asset and the Russians won in the election, or if we will stand up and clap in the Canadian Parliament for an actual member of the SS, we can't fall for Russian disinformation. The implication being that only the Russians would spread the conspiracy theory that we actually stood up in front of cameras and clapped for the SS. So they're not.
But that's actually malinformation, isn't it?
It would be, but they're not being honest about the definitions. And so even if they're only using disinformation as the pretext to crack down on this, they will expand the definitions just to surveil and censor you.
Yeah. But no, the point I really kind of wanted to drive to with all of this stuff is the enforcement mechanism that they're going to grant themselves. So they're basically, what they're going to do is they're going to set up some sort of committee, which is going to be behind closed doors and reports only to the EU Commission. So it's reporting so we don't get to see who's on. Well, we might get to find out who's on this panel, but we won't get to see their workings, their discussions, anything like that. It reports straight to the EU Commissioner, like Ferry and
I have it on good authority. They report straight to Moloch.
Quite possibly, or if there's a difference, really. And they're going to be the ones deciding, okay, what is disinformation? And basically, they haven't published their criteria for judging, to your point. So they can basically just say anything that they don't like now is disinformation and can be taken down. And they've given themselves some real teeth with this bill. So they've defined the group that comes in for special attention, which is these very large online platforms, they call them. So it's basically
Lots.
it's who you would expect. It's Google, Apple, Twitter. It's all
all of
big
the
ones.
organizations, save for Twitter, who are more than happy to go along with this and probably help to fund the creation of these commissions.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this one I think has got, because I'm not trying to make any case that Google and Apple and Microsoft are not pro censorship. They very much are, but I think they are pro censorship that they can define themselves. So this is a sort of battle of control. This is an alien versus predator thing going on, where the EU is trying to say, no, we will be the ones who define it, not you platforms, because we know these platforms are censorious. But the EU is trying to say, okay, well, we want to be the ones who decides what is censorious. And they're giving
so who guts and disembowels me is my question, is the question that we're asking. Yes. Which alien monstrosity is about to murder me?
Exactly right. And they're giving themselves some real teeth on this. So they can now fine these very large online platforms 6% of global revenues, which is a huge amount. So take Google as an example. Google have got revenues about 280 billion. 6% of that is 17 billion. Per fine, per instance of disinformation that they've decided is information they don't want out there, that Google leaves up. 17 billion, please. So they're going to want that, and then that gets you into thinking, okay, so how is tech going to respond to this? And this is the interesting bit of this at the moment, which is why I wanted to talk about it. Which is Google can come at this in a number of ways. One, they could just pull out of Europe.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, the argument against that is, I reckon they've got about 60 billion of revenues coming from Europe. It's difficult to tell because they report Europe, Middle East, and Africa as one entity, but it's roughly 60 billion of revenue coming from the EU. I would have thought. You don't want to lose that, but the problem is okay. Well, let's play it out. Let's say they pull out of the EU. What are they doing there? Well, they are protecting themselves from the effect of this spreading elsewhere. Because if other regulators see that the EU has crossed a line, and all the big tech platforms pull out of Europe, that will basically stop this kind of level of censorship. And the censorship will remain with the tech platforms where they want to keep it. They want to keep it with themselves.
I don't know if that's going to play out that way, just because even if they do a temporary withdrawal, they will have to have some form of compliance infrastructure in the works in anticipation of this law. And so if the EU implement this, other places will start to implement nearly unanimous laws. This is why everyone's doing the sort of 2030 thing. If it comes top down from some sort of think tank or an international body, it ends up going everywhere eventually.
So GWPR is an example of that. Started in Europe, and then a version of it spread to the US.
There's something else to consider as well, which is if they do not pull out, and even if foreign countries do not implement these same censorship laws, then the organizations like Google, like Twitter, like Facebook, they will all have implemented the new compliance facilities to be able to comply with all of this, and then that will just get applied to every other country anyway.
Yeah, that's why I made this comment on this one, which is when she says we're bringing European values into the digital world. That is more true than it sounds, because the way software works is you don't want to have two parallel versions of the same sort. Software is you put an awful lot of money into writing really good code, and then you basically run it across everything in the entire world. So if these EU censorship programs go into effect, even if it's just the EU, these big platforms will probably write their code in such a way that it applies universally. So yes, she is right. The European censorship values are effectively being exported to the entire world.
Yeah, they're building themselves a European ban hammer, but all of a sudden every other country is going to look like a big juicy nail.
And also, it's not like they aren't eager to comply with this, because we covered this last year in October, but the Intercept expose on the Biden administration for how they conduct themselves during COVID, you got the internal Slack channels and various texts to Microsoft, Meta, and Twitter heads, where the Biden administration were making targeted requests to censor, shadow ban, and outright ban posts and accounts, down to Anthony Fauci parody accounts with minimal followers.
Yeah.
And all of the executives were happy to do so because they wanted the same trajectory of travel. They were just frustrated at the means of enacting it. So eventually, even if this does become a squabble between the EU and Silicon Valley, it's only on the means of immiserating all of us.
Yes.
They all have the same intention.
Yeah, so that's actually my second scenario. So the first scenario is that they pull out of the EU, which seems drastic. But my point is, if they're earning 60 billion revenues from the EU and the cost of implementing this is, I don't know, a third or a quarter of that, at some point they think to themselves, okay, is it worth this market as opposed to protecting the rest of our market? So that's kind of my argument there.
You've said that the revenue that they get from the EU for Google, for instance, is about 60 billion euros.
Yep.
So even if
dollars,
$60 billion, yep. Even if they do get fined for any reason, that's 6%, 17 billion. That's still in the green for them.
Well, that's one fine is 17 billion.
That's one fine, but you can be sure that they wouldn't allow it to go past one single fine. So, from their perspective, the risk calculation might just be that, well, even if we do make one misstep, which we'll make sure is only the one, then we're still coming out in the positive form.
Yeah, 17 billion is a hell of a lot for one misstep. I mean, if you could afford to get it down to,
I don't think
one,
they would allow themselves to
zero.
make that misstep anyway. I think they would just go complete censorious.
Yeah, well, this is the second scenario. The second scenario is Uber compliance, and what I mean by that is every time they get a takedown request, they just implement it without even thinking about it. I mean, anything that even looks like it might come close to the line. Or
have
get
they
a takedown
specified that there's any kind of appeals process for these organisations if the EU potentially asks them to take down something that doesn't fall?
Okay, so weirdly, this document, this act does include some capacity to, if a YouTube video is taken down, for example, you've got new powers to be able to appeal it. So there are ways for the individual to appeal against the platform if they feel the platform's made a mistake. There is no mechanism once the EU Commission has decided that something has to go for that to be appealed against. It is just gone. And as I'm saying, because the fines are so large, in Google's case, it'd be 17 billion. Of course, I think what's going to happen is they're going to go to Uber compliance, which is they just instantly take down stuff. Now, what that means is that the EU have handed themselves a tool where basically the big tech companies have to choose between either pulling out of the EU or doing whatever they say, whenever they say. And what they've done is they've given themselves this ability to remove anything, and they're the ones who get to define what it is. So this is a basically total online censorship power for the EU.
Well, it's funny you also say compliance. Reminder, the people that are policing this sort of stuff, the same kind of elites who, many of whom were in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book and on the calendar. So do we really believe that they care about children's safety? And I say this because we now have multiple instances where Instagram knowingly allows videos of young European women to be filmed without their consent on nights out, to be preyed upon by potential illegal boat migrants. Instagram redirects people that are clicking on hashtags that direct them towards child sexual exploitation material to say, we know that this directs you towards this material. Would you like to continue anyway? So they know it exists on their platform and face no repercussions. So all that happens is certain things are defined as needing policing and compliance. So misinformation or disinformation, whereas the actual child exploitation material will go overlooked and that won't be fined. So Google can allow the most heinous stuff, Meta, etc., on their platform to still exist and not face a fine, but they can still police the exact narrative that both Silicon Valley and the European Union want to crack down on. So that's why I don't think actually the fine power is as much of a worry for them as you maybe make out.
So there is bits in there along the lines of what you're talking about. So it talks about the risks that they're most worried about. Disinformation, obviously, that's a bit that's a particular concern. Election manipulation,
which I've been told has never happened.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, isn't it? Election interference has never happened, but it did in 2016.
Maybe the Bush one as well.
Apparently. And then it never happened after that.
Yes.
But cyber violence against women is what you're talking about there, and harms to minors online.
Again, so, defining harms very loosely there.
Yeah. So if it was just those latter two, if this bill was all about cyber violence against women, I'd still have concerns over who's defining that and all the rest of it, and harms to minors and children, and the illegal stuff like the child porn and the Hamas shooting videos and stuff like that. If it was just that, I don't think anyone would have that much of a problem with it. I mean, there's still issues around the edges, but it's all this bit that which is the key bit, which is the disinformation, the election. What do they call it? Manipulation.
Crisis response mechanism in serious threat of public health and security crises. So the next pandemic,
yes,
you can't question the narrative again.
Yes,
right.
As they continue to redefine climate change as being a health condition that you can actively suffer from, then any amount of skepticism will be continually deplatformed and censored, and you're told that not only are you spreading malinformation, you're actively hurting other people's health.
Same with misogyny and incel violence. So there goes half your segments down.
Well, yes. Oh God, that's a shame. But yeah, so this is the tussle I wanted to point out. I'm not saying that big tech is not pro-censorship. They are, and the EU is obviously pro-censorship. But there is this tussle going on to be aware of, where the EU is saying, no, we are the censors, and big tech are saying, no, we are the censors. And they're both kind of fighting over this rope at the moment as to who gets to be the ultimate arbiter of this censorship.
It's better for us if they're squabbling, actually. That's a good observation, yeah.
Possibly.
Not if they're,
It slows it down.
Yeah.
It slows it down, but not if their squabbles just result in the same thing anyway, just
Sure.
a month or two down the line. Oh, wow, I get an extra month of being able to say the things that I need to.
Yeah.
But then, by the end of it, they end up stronger because they're both completely in collusion with one another.
So there is a good outcome from this, which is the big tech companies say, though, this is too onerous, and therefore we're going to pull out of the EU. And that breaks the regulatory momentum on this kind of stuff. And also it fosters a whole bunch of new EU-based competitors who can then emerge, who will then be below the threshold and all that kind of stuff. So that's a golden scenario. Don't think that's probably going to happen.
Yep.
The other one is that big tech responds to this by saying, okay, fine, we'll do our censorship, you do your censorship, and we're both just censor together, which is probably more likely.
Ultra compliance.
Yes. It's a bit of a shame. We shouldn't have to deal with this, should we?
No, would be nice.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the premium videos, this one on how we can win the culture war, a speech of the wit from Carl Benjamin. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.